Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Leadership Training Challenges and Solutions, sponsored by GP Strategies, Impact, InfoPro Learning, Intrepid by VitalSource, and Leadership Progress Cycle. I'm Avery Vogt, Events Manager here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled you could all be here with us today. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. Throughout today's event, please feel free to use the chat for comments and submit questions in the Q&A panel. All questions will be addressed during the event or at the end of the program during our Q&A section. At the end of your time with us, you'll notice a short survey has popped open in your browser, so please fill out that and share your thoughts on today's event. All of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us with a link to the on-demand sessions. If this is your first Training Industry event, a special welcome goes out to you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. We would also love what you have to say about today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform and let's continue the conversation. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today. Lynn Fagan, Global Head of Leadership Development at Agilent Technologies, Leah Clark, Leadership Practice Lead at GP Strategies, and Lisa Fagan, Global Vice President, Leadership and Inclusion at GP Strategies. And with that, we are very excited to have you all here today. And Lisa, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Avery, and it's a real pleasure to be with all of you here today. So thank you for joining us. Would love to share a little bit more about the panel that we've convened here today so that you have a little bit more insight to who we are. I'll start with Lynn Fagan. She is not my relative. She is not my sister, although we've joked around about that quite a bit in the past. It just so happens we have the same last name spelled the same, and we're lucky enough to get to work with each other over the years. Lynn Fagan is the head of global leadership at Agilent Technologies. And over the years that we've known her, we've developed this incredible partnership where Agilent has really advised us on some of our content, application of different tools and models, and they've really given us some terrific guidance from the perspective of the customer. So I thank you, Lynn, for joining us here today and taking the time to be kind of the voice of the customer for us here on this panel. Leah Clark is a colleague of mine. She runs our global practice for consultants and solutions design. She's also a significant, probably the primary thought leader that we have in our business, does a lot of writing. She does all of our research, and she's just integral to how we weave in what we hear in the marketplace into the designs of our programs and what we do with our clients every day. So thank you for being our subject matter expert on this call, Leah. So to get us warmed up here, I'd love to ask you all, what we're here to talk about today is how challenging it is for leaders in this business environment to keep their employees engaged, to be effective in role. Basically, what we're seeing in the marketplace around us is happening so fast. It's impacting our businesses so quickly that I don't think in my entire career I've ever seen this much pressure put on leaders to have to pivot and adapt and find ways to keep their employees engaged. So I'd love for you, just to get us kicked off here, to go ahead and put, yes, it is hard work, Amanda, you are right. Could you please do me a favor and drop in the chat what the word engagement conjures up for you? What's the first thought that comes to mind when you hear that term? And we'll use what you're putting in the chat here to just get us warmed up a bit. And while you're doing that, I am going to pose a question to Lynn and just basically ask you, Lynn, when you have been working in your organization and thinking about engagement and thinking about your sort of experience personally with engagement, can you tell us a little bit about what you think a great day at work looks like for you? Give us an authentic story. And I'm going to also ask our folks that are out there in the audience who are kindly putting things in the chat to think about this question as well. What does a great day at work look like for you? You don't have to go into a long story in the chat. You can just pop in a few words if that's easier, because it's tough to tell a story in the chat. But Lynn, I'll ask you to tell us a story, please, about what a great day at work looks like.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I love this question. So, one of my great days at work was during an executive leadership event that I helped design and run. It was a 2-day event, and it was the first time in years that we brought together more than 100 of our leaders since before COVID. So to say there was a lot at stake here, I think is a little bit of an understatement. So for me, those 2 days really checked every box as to why I love doing what I do. I got to contribute directly to the organization's success, and I worked alongside some amazing people from all different functions. And I really had the freedom to shape the experience for the executives. So, one of the other things that made it a great day at work for me is that I love a good challenge. And of course, we had our share. At one point, our roof leaked. So we had to deal with that, but our team handled it like pros. And at the end of that event, I was so proud of what we pulled off. It was hands down the best leadership meeting I've ever been to. And many of the executives said the same. But what really made the difference for me was to seeing everybody walk away energized and connected again. That was really the payoff for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm seeing some really wonderful responses in the chat too. Kathy's talking about a great day and early morning quiet time to get the best ideas on paper, and so some people need to have that quiet time for themselves, and others need to have that interactivity. So, thank you for sharing that story, Lynn. And let's take a look then at how this syncs up with GP Strategy's point of view. So, Leah, I mean, what's your take on that? How well does that story line up, or what you're seeing in the chat?
So not only does Lynn's story line up, and of course, we've talked about Lynn's great day at work before this session, so perhaps that's not a surprise. But as much as Lynn's story emphasizes how we look at engagement, you're all doing it in the chat as well with your contribution. So I always love asking this question because those of you who participate in our sessions or who are on this webinar, you're defining engagement through your stories, through your reflection, and through what you're sharing in the chat. But we promised in this webinar a blend of ideas and definitions. We said that we would share the X model with you. In fact, that is the title of the session. And Lynn's story really brings the framework to life. Our approach to engagement really emphasizes what is important to both the organization, both in this case to Agilent, and to the employee. And it's an approach that we know Agilent has used with much success, as have other organizations. And I promise that I'll go through this quickly because I think most of the value and intrigue of this session will come from what Lynn and others are sharing in their own stories. But bear with me just for a moment as we set up the framework or the context here, because we do believe that engagement is about a relationship between employees and employers. And Lynn described that in her story. She didn't talk about a day where she, was able to sort of goof off or do her own thing or not put in hard work. Just the opposite. She talked about the hard work and the accomplishment of what she produced, what her team produced for Agilent in the form of a successful meeting. And at the same time, if you listened closely, you could hear what was really important to Lynn as well. And I wrote down some of the words collaboration and pride. And so what we know about engagement is that it is about the success of the organization. Agilent is working to achieve success as defined by its values, its goals, and its strategies. But at the same time, Agilent and any organization relies on its employees like Lynn to help them with those contributions, with achieving that success. Lynn, however, much like Lisa, much like all of you on this call, we're on our own path to success based on our values, our goals, our strategy, and that's different for each and every one of us. Where the organization and the employee overlaps is in this center diamond or the grid. It overlaps on the job. And both parties need each other, right? You need maximum contribution out of your employees each and every day. But people work at different levels, and not everybody is contributing the most at every moment or at every time within their work week, month, or even year. On their other side, your employees, again, like Lynn, want maximum satisfaction. And that is defined again uniquely for each person. With Lynn, I heard collaboration, I heard pride. Those are values that emerged for her. And she wants to maximize those values each and every day. She wants maximum satisfaction. Now, I want to confirm or let you know that within this diamond lies all of your employees, and they're going to move around at different points in time. So your contribution and your satisfaction varies. It's not a static point, if you will. However, what you want as often as possible is to get your people to the top of that grid, a place where they are giving all that they can to the organization and they're satisfied by the work that they do. That is the apex of engagement. That is when people are having, to the question we asked you, more great days at work. And I couldn't see everybody in the chat because you were moving so quickly, but I saw Angela talk about a time where she was at work creating something and there was fun and laughter. So in that, Angela's giving all that she can to that great day, creating something for the organization, and her values, which perhaps are associated with fun and laughter, they were fulfilled for her. I saw Georgiana. She said, and Georgiana, I hope I got your name correct. She said it was a day when I learned something and there was meaningful connection. Whenever we ask this question, we again hear these stories of giving something to the organization. The organization is getting what they need to and want to out of their people, and those individuals are satisfied by the work that they do. So that illustration for you in the stories, in the model of that win-win scenario. I want to quickly talk about and highlight the fact that you can be at different places in this diamond, in this overlap. And these are not single points in time and they are not labels. So please keep that in mind, even as you see the way we've labeled the diagram. We're not putting labels on people and we're not saying that if you're engaged, you're always engaged. You will in fact move around. So for example, you might be at maximum contribution. You are really giving your organization everything it needs. A lot. You're working a lot and maybe performing in a way that is just fantastic for your company. But if that goes to an extreme where perhaps you're burnt out, you aren't meeting whatever you define as work-life balance, perhaps you're not seeing your family, you could get to a place where you are burnt out. That is not a place of engagement, and it's likely a position that, if it's repeated over time, is going to cause you to exit the organization. That is not engagement. On the other hand, you might be new to the organization, so you're really excited about this new job that you have, but maybe you're not really sure yet what good contribution looks like, or maybe you're not fully contributing. So we wanted to just tee this up again as you think about engagement. How is it defined? What are the benefits to the organization and the employee? This is the way that we think about engagement. This is the way we've seen it play out in organizations. And I will just tell you, as we move to the next part of the session, which I think is a question for Lynn, this was something that was particularly meaningful for me as I joined GP Strategy many, many years ago, having worked for an organization that I always call is a slash. It was all about contribution. Satisfaction wasn't part of the equation. And as a result, I think we saw some really good folks leave the company and not return. So good for the organization, good for the employee. In Lynn's stories, in what you're putting in the chat, and certainly shown in the model. With that, Lynn, Lisa, I think it's going back to you.
Yeah. And I'm just reflecting a little bit on some of the comments I'm seeing in the chat, Leah and Lynn, and I'm loving what I'm seeing here. Keith is commenting here that he's saying basically the less I have to interact with anyone, the better day I have. And, and there's certainly those people that feel that way, right? I mean, I can tell you there are definitely days where I feel that way, but on the whole, I tend to be more extroverted, but people that prefer to be more focused and working individually. And he's saying, look, I bang out projects better than anybody, and I meet all of the metrics that are required, right? So I love
and that's where his personal definition comes in. So it's a great illustration, right, of what working conditions work for Keith and what satisfaction looks like for him personally. So a little bit of humor, we think, Keith, in what we're seeing in your comment, but Lisa, I think that's a great call out.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, Lynn, I'd love to come back to you because I'm aware of how Agilent has deployed this concept, or the X model is what we call it, and in your organization. But does it really resonate? I mean, keep us honest. Does it resonate with all levels, with all different roles in the organization?
It's a great question, Lisa. And my answer is absolutely. The X model really does resonate at every level. Think of it from the individual contributors to our frontline managers to our senior leaders. What it's done for us at Agilent is it's really given everybody a shared understanding that engagement is a joint responsibility. It also gave us a way to measure it. And the model shows that, that diamond that, Leah was talking about, it shows that each of us sits somewhere. And that's right at the point where, Agilent's needs and the personal needs of that individual meet. It helped us emphasize that engagement is personal. And I want to comment on a couple of that I also heard in the chat. Personal for Georgiana, you talked about meaningful connections as engagement for yourself or satisfaction or great day at work. Utilizing your skills, that was Lisa. And projects that make your team successful was another individual. Those are all different ways, right? That us as individuals measure our engagement. And the model shows that, again, each of us sits somewhere in that diamond. And it really helps shape engagement. It helped us align that, engagement is shaped by every level in the organization and that we all have a role to play. So think of us as individuals. We all have our own engagement. Like I said, that meaningful connection in Georgiana, right? But as leaders, we create the conditions that make it possible and we drive engagement. And then we have our executives, right? And they set the tone for a culture where engagement thrives. So, really, what we love about this model is it helped us reframe employee engagement as more than just participation. And let me say that again, right? It's
Mhm.
more than just participation, it's about that spark, being not only involved in the work that I do here at Agilent, but genuinely being enthusiastic about it. And that was that explained in my great day at work with my leadership meeting. So that great day at work that I shared earlier, that was the spark for me.
Yeah, no, so I bet the audience can now see, hearing your passion and the stories that you're sharing, Lynn, why we so value the input that you give us at GP Strategies and how grateful we are that you all are willing to sort of test and be a true testimony for the work that we do. So thank you for that. I'm seeing the chat slow down a little bit, so I want to encourage our participants to keep commenting in the chat as we go because it's a bit of a fuel for us as panelists here so that we can react to your thoughts and reactions to what we're sharing. And this does look like a place, Leah, where I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, basically accountability. How do you think this applies to individuals?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I love the fuel question because just to let the folks on the phone know, we do have a poll coming up for you. So we are going to ask you your perspective on this. But I want to just underscore, and Lynn did a great job of teeing this up. Engagement. Each individual owns their own engagement. She did talk about the manager having a role and executives having a role. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But it starts with the individual. Each individual is accountable for their own engagement. You can't look to your leader to make you engaged. And a big part of that is because of that satisfaction driver. Only you know what's important to you, what your values are, what will satisfy you. For some, maybe it's compensation, achievement, collaboration, innovation, the opportunity to be creative, all of those things. And if you don't know what's important to you, you can't find it at work. So yes, managers play a role. We'll talk about culture very, very briefly at the executive level, but it starts with the individual, checking in with yourself, owning your own engagement. And one of the great places to start is with understanding your own values and motivators. And so with that individual aspect, I think, Lisa, we're going to ask the individuals on the call to participate for a moment.
bet, you bet. This is a great time to do a poll and to reignite your participation here, audience. So we're going to invite you, basically, you're going to see the questions here. Bear in mind all the things that we've shared, that engagement isn't a label, it's very fluid, but we want to know where you're at today. Where are you in terms of your level of engagement? And just go ahead and highlight here whichever one seems to really match where you're at today, whether you're really engaged, almost engaged, satisfied but not contributing, contributing but not satisfied, or completely disengaged. And as you're answering these, whichever one best suits where you're at today, remember that, as I said, it is fluid, and you could be highly engaged today, and just different things either in your personal life or in work life can affect your level of engagement tomorrow. And that can be, it's perfectly okay for it to shift like that, to move from one level to the other. And it's incumbent upon us as colleagues, as individuals, to help each other with where we're at in terms of our levels of engagement. Doesn't all fall on the leaders, as Leah said. We do have some of our own accountability and making sure that we're engaged and that we're participating and doing what we can to contribute to the organization and be satisfied in our roles. But there is also the aspect of how leaders can influence that, for sure. So how are we doing on the poll there, Avery? Oh, here we go. All right. So we've got 30% that say that they're feeling engaged today, 28% almost engaged. So the better part of you are either almost engaged or engaged. 3% of you are satisfied, but not feeling like you're contributing at this point in time. Others of you, 36% of you, are saying that you're contributing, but you're not fully satisfied. So it's that side of the X where you're giving, but not feeling like you're getting back. And 3% of you disengaged. So, Leah, what do you think about these results?
Well, 3% who are disengaged, but on the webinar today. So I have some hope for those folks. I would say these are certainly, I would say, the contributing but not satisfied jumps out at me for sure. I think that we are seeing a lot of fatigue, competing priorities, anxiety around what's happening outside of organizations, concerns about the economy, politics, global challenges, and then within organizations, sometimes folks are having a hard time connecting to something bigger. They may not feel as though they have growth and development. Again, there's some burnout maybe and fatigue in there. So I have to say I'm not entirely surprised by these numbers. Engagement has been trending down a little bit from prior years, so we can talk about that. But again, if you are in a place where maybe you are disengaged right now or contributing but not satisfied, that's where you are now. And there's always the opportunity to reflect on what can you do to drive your level of satisfaction and to let your manager, your leader, know what satisfaction looks like for you, and to do a good job of understanding what good contribution looks like as well. And I commented on that for a specific reason. I also want to comment on what Lee has said in the chat as we were leading into this poll. And Lee said that I'm responsible for my own satisfaction. Absolutely, Lee. I think you're locking in with us, as my 18-year-old likes to say. We're locked in here because your satisfaction is unique to you. And you also made a comment about the leader manager should know these things. Absolutely. And that is a critical part of where I wanted to take the conversation next. If I can just close out the poll and move us forward. Let's see if I am successful there. Yeah. So Lee, you're locking in with where we're going, and absolutely spot on with what you're saying. Each individual needs to know what motivates them and what are their satisfaction drivers. Your manager, your leader, is responsible for creating an environment where engagement can thrive and support individuals' engagement equation. How do they do that? What does that look like? That looks like engaging in open conversations, building rapport, developing trust, so that you can talk to your people about what does good contribution look like. Set goals, connect the work that they do to something bigger, provide them with feedback, coach, all of the things that you do as a manager and a leader to help them understand what good contribution looks like and where they might be exceeding or falling a little short of that. At the same time, Absolutely, Lee. Your manager should know what those personal drivers are, what those values are. It's incumbent upon you as an individual to reflect on that and then to share that with your manager. The more your manager, your leader knows about what satisfies you, what your values are, what those drivers are, the more they will be able to help create the conditions, not own your engagement, but create the conditions where they can absolutely get the best out of you. So managers, leaders play a pivotal role in creating that environment and helping to drive the conversations around contribution, performance, and satisfaction or career. So I love to be the model person, and Lynn always gets to come in and tell the real life stories. So I'm wondering, Lynn, if you want to comment on the leader or the manager role beyond what you've already shared.
Absolutely. And this is about leadership, this talk today, right? So, at Agilent, we really believe that effective leadership begins with self-awareness and also our own personal engagement. So think about that for just a minute. Leaders must prioritize their own engagement first. And think about that as, I talk about, putting your oxygen mask on, right? Before you assist others. That's the same thing with our engagement. So we need to prioritize our own engagement first. We need to walk the walk and talk the talk before we can really support others. And as leaders, we need to put people first. Exactly what was talked about in the chat. Our leaders should know this. Yeah, as leaders, we need to put people first and really genuinely get to know each team member. We need to understand what motivates them and what demotivates them, right? And recognize what makes a great day at work for them and really what doesn't. And that helps build trust and the foundation for the strong relationships we have with our employees, right? And then the X model helps us see it, right? So since our engagement can be impacted by many things, Leah, you brought up a lot of them earlier, right? About anything from, it could be what we're working on that day to a macroeconomic condition that's impacting our entire business, right? It's important for us to have those ongoing conversations, deep conversations with each team member, and we have to continuously monitor and help manage their engagement. And what I mean by that is if you determine that you do have somebody, and we just talked about 36%, I think you said, the survey said, right, that we have contributing but not satisfied. What we do with those individuals is we usually look at maybe providing a stretch assignment and opportunity for them, so that we can help them be more satisfied with their work and their job. Or, we have some that are almost engaged. And I know we had quite a few also in our survey today say that they were, almost engaged. So what do we do with those folks? Well, some of them are burned out. That's why they're not quite engaged, right? So how can we help them? And what we do is help them set the boundaries because they're typically our overachievers, right? And help them set boundaries so they're not burned out. And for me personally, in order for me to stay in that engaged, I know what I need. I need to be empowered and I need autonomy, but I need to share that with my leader who helps create those conditions, right? So that we work together in that shared partnership that we were talking about, that shared accountability and responsibility. But one step further as leaders, we have this, I call it the both and approach. And that's tricky, right? Because that's aligning the needs of Agilent with what drives engagement for each of our team members. So we know that sustainable success at Agilent is only going to be achieved if and when we help people, we lead, contribute fully to Agilent's outcomes, and also at the same time fulfilling that unique definition of personal satisfaction, like we talked about earlier, which were projects that make your team successful. Somebody said utilizing your skills and also those meaningful connections. Me personally, though, for that to happen, it's helping employees grow and experience meaningful, fulfilling days at work, and that's where I feel most engaged. I hope that helps a little bit.
It does. It does help a lot. And I'm seeing some reactions in the chat here that are really interesting, and love to get you ladies, since we've got a little bit of time here, I'd love to get reactions from both Leah and Lynn on these. But
Yeah. I'm reading what's in the chat here as well. Absolutely. I think JB, I'm not sure, JB, I can see your last name and your initials. You made a comment about company culture. Absolutely. And I think that's a great comment. We'll talk about that really quickly when we talk about the E of the model. I also think Lee made a really interesting comment about how throughout Lee's career, priorities have shifted, what satisfaction looks like, pay, promotion, recognition, different at different points in their career. Crystal and Keith are engaging in some dialogue, maybe a little heated dialogue about return to office, and Crystal saying that perhaps that has caused some of the dip in engagement. What I always find interesting about that debate is to get underneath it, and is it really about the time in the office, or is it the value of being able to have more time maybe to prioritize your family and to get some balance, or to save money on the lack of a commute, or whatever that is. I always find that hybrid debate interesting, and getting away from the hours and the days and to kind of get underneath what does that lack of a commute or that hybrid schedule give you that satisfies some value that's really important to you. Keith, you're interesting in your comments, because earlier on you're like, I don't need to talk to my employees, and yet I'm in the office and I'm good with that. So I'm trying to figure you out here, but you've been doing a lot of chat about that, and I really appreciate you providing your thoughts and sharing your perspective about what works for you. So I love that. I just want to comment on one other question that I saw here before I see if either one of you two ladies would like to comment. I believe it was Rose that asked about how can we shift the paradigm from the organization being ultimately responsible for an individual's ability to be engaged to individuals owning their own satisfaction and engagement. I think there are a couple of things. This is certainly, I think, a place where a lot of organizations find themselves, where individuals have a sense for, I'm not satisfied, therefore it is, the organization's job to make me satisfied. And so I do think some of it is a mindset shift in the way the organization speaks about engagement, in the way you assess engagement using an engagement survey and sharing those results. I think it's in the language that you start to use. I know Agilent's been really big on using language throughout the organization, even cascading the X model down through the organization, so that everyone starts to have, as you said, Lynn, that common understanding around what that looks like. And then I think a lot of it, Rose, is in the conversations that the leader has one-on-one with individuals, really helping them to reflect, maybe even challenging them to surface what is important to them. I said it earlier and I'll say it again. If you don't know what's important to you, it's going to be hard to find it at work. And so I think it's in the conversations, the way you assess, the language that you use, but certainly you're not the only one probably finding themselves in a situation where this is a hard mindset to shift. So I've said a lot. I want to toss it back to Lynn or Lisa based on what you're seeing in the chat and your observations.
I want to make one more comment and invite you to this as well, Lynn, and then we probably need to get to the E from a time standpoint for where we are in the webinar today. But Kendra made a comment, and I'm seeing this bit of debate, perhaps is one way to say it, in the chat about whether or not the responsibility falls on the manager or on the individual. And Kendra's comment here says that I think it's important to realize that as an organization, you can do anything and everything for the employee, but the individual needs to make that personal commitment. And, not long ago, I had to have a conversation with someone in our organization, because as managers, here's what I think. I think we can tell when someone's not engaged, but you can't force engagement on the individual. You can invite engagement, and you can, do everything you can to make them feel engaged, but they have to I agree with Kendra. I think they have to commit and want to be there. And if they don't want to be there and they're just taking up space, it's not good for them. It's not good for the organization. Lynn, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, and you also make a good point, Lisa, and everybody knows the whole thing about you can, bring, the water to the horse, but you can't make them drink, right? That's what made this makes me think about, right? Is that you can do everything as a leader to create that condition for them as they share what makes them satisfied, and they truly may still not be satisfied, right? You have to
Right.
understand is that we can't as leaders pull rabbits out of hats, right? We wish we could, or pixie dust is what I call it sometimes, right? We can't make the magic happen all the time, but what I do want to, really emphasize here is the conversations. I am a person who's usually always engaged. Always, because I find the happiness and the joy in what I do, and I try to do more of that. Right. And I try to not focus on the things that are out of my control as an individual. Sometimes that can make my satisfaction come down, but I can't control it. My leader may not even be able to control it, right, Lisa and Leah? And neither can the company, right?
Yeah.
So I just say to emphasize is that as leaders, as executives, and you'll see in just a moment, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we set the tone from the top. And as executives, we'll talk a little bit about self-awareness. I think that's a key here too, Lisa. If we aren't aware of what makes us happy and we can't communicate that to our leaders, or it's going to be really hard for them to help us, right? But
Yeah.
I'm really clear with my leader on what makes me happy, and it's autonomy, it's empowerment, it's being able to make decisions. And can I make every decision? Absolutely not. But knowing which ones I get a chance to be involved in, and knowing the impact of what I may have been involved in, but not a decision maker, that's what also will create those satisfaction days for me. I don't know if that resonated with anybody. Put a thumbs up, put some chats in there, and let us know if it did or did not. But that's just something I thought to share to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up pop in there. So thank you for that, Lynn. Lee, I'm going to come back to you because we're not far away from time and see if you want to address the executive's role.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick stopping point. Lynn used the term oxygen mask. Another way we think about it, as I exit the manager part and head to the executive part, certainly the manager creates the conditions and engages in those conversations. I just want to say conversation, rapport, dialogue, all of that is key to the manager and the individual sort of unpacking what this looks like, both from a contribution and a satisfaction standpoint. And just remember, one dead battery can't jumpstart another. So for those managers, being in touch with their own level of engagement is really super important. And then last but not least, I'll address the executives very, very quickly. They set the tone at the top, right? They set the tone for the organization, including for individuals they may never meet. And so being able to demonstrate trustworthiness, to communicate, to shape the larger culture with a focus on both contribution and satisfaction. So back to my example of I worked for an organization that was a slash, right? If you're setting the tone, it is with focus and communication that emphasizes, yes, you want your employees to contribute to your organization, and it's important to you that they're also satisfied by the work that they do, so that win-win can be established. And I know we are coming up close to time. So Lynn, do you want to comment on this before we move into the last part?
Yeah, and this is the practicality too. So I'll kind of throw it all together, and that may suffice for later to the example later, Leah. But like many organizations, Agilent uses employee engagement surveys to assess satisfaction and motivation, and workplace perceptions. All of you on the call can probably raise your hand or a thumbs up and say, "Yeah, we do those." But while they're insightful, do they truly measure engagement? And do they truly, understand, put that understanding of engagement that's really required across an organization to determine whether or not people are engaged? And, knowing that everybody, you as an employee yourself, people managers, and the executives we just talked about, impact an employee's engagement. We had, and what we did at Agilent is we created an enterprise-wide strategy for driving it. In fact, we actually aligned our leadership expectations to engagement, specifically driving engagement. So our strategy to do this is centered around the X model and those ongoing conversations that you were talking about, Leah, that are so important. So even though the individuals we were all talking about, we all understand that we own our own engagement, we introduced it through our leadership development program to help our leaders first to foster those conditions and how to support engagement first. And then what we did is we aligned the program objectives with our leadership competencies, including driving engagement. And we've seen an increase in engagement through our learning effectiveness surveys. And we really do contribute that to the simplicity of this model. It's accessible across all levels understand it, and it really enables employees and leaders to measure and manage engagement together that you were talking about, Leah. And, it led to greater satisfaction and contribution and more engaged individuals, which really is a win-win across the organization.
Thank you for that, Lynn. Yeah, that's a really great way to bring to life how, from a practical point of view, you were able to deploy a model like this in your organization. Were there any other tips or tricks that you would offer to our audience that are about, how do I take something like this and bring it to life in our business? I mean, you talked a little bit about how you did it at Agilent. Or any lessons you've learned, anything you'd do differently, anything you'd add?
What we learned is that we were learning that engagement was defined differently across the organization. I don't know if that resonates with you, Leah and Lisa, but everybody had their own definition of what it was. And some just thought, well, I'm doing my job, I'm engaged, right? So what we learned is that we didn't have that shared definition about the contributing at a maximum level and also being satisfied at the same time with what we're doing as individuals that really creates the engagement. So that's what we learned from this. And what we also learned is that it was easy. So it wasn't hard for us to roll it out and use it. But what was hard is the consistency, right? Is to keep going back to it because it changes. It can change day to day sometimes. So we encourage our leaders to make sure they're having their one-on-ones, and you carve out time just for engagement conversations, not for status, not just for project overview of escalated issues, right? Or whatever it may be. You have to carve out the time just for these conversations. And that's what we learned. But what we learned is this model made it easy for us to have the conversation and carve out that time. I don't know if that helps.
It does. It does. And, you're so right about it being different for everyone, right? And we've seen this on the chat today. We've seen it in this webinar that engagement means something different to all of us. So if we really want to get a common definition using similar language and common agreement around what makes us engaged, it's important to have a sort of a galvanizing model like this to use. All right, so we are at 12:42. We have, I think, 3 minutes to open up the floor to any questions, or maybe there's some things in the chat that I haven't directly addressed that we can touch upon. So I do want to invite any additional questions to come onto the chat. And my colleagues here can help me with scanning the chat, if you would, for anything that I did not catch coming on to this portion of the webinar.
No, I'll just say, as we're waiting for a question to pop in, I do think there's a lot of comments which are consistent with hopefully one of the key messages around managers having those conversations, right? I see Jean saying that managers can't seem to do this. They're too busy to carve out the time for that type of conversation. Totally understand that. And it's going to be hard to know where your person is on that X model of engagement without those conversations. But I fully recognize, especially the performance side of things can be hard for employees. I mean, for leaders to share performance feedback, and career conversations, which always float to the top of the list as a area for improvement in engagement surveys, are often one of the most neglected conversations that leaders have with their people. So I see some comments, Lisa, about those conversations, carving out 10 minutes a month.
Right.
And so not a question, but some comments
In the
there. Yeah,
development, right? That's another one I see that a lot of on the back burner, right? As we go, we're so results driven sometimes as organizations, right? And it's about how do you balance driving results with building and sustaining strong relationships, right? Because you're not going to always get those results if the people are starting to be less satisfied. They're going to stop maybe contributing to. And at that point, having that 15-minute conversation, right, could have saved you a loss of an employee. It could have saved you a sale. It could have, right? So it's really about making sure that we from the top. And Brett had this conversation, had this question. It says, the question on my mind is which comes first? The manager or employer accountability or the individual accountability to engagement. Most individuals I know feel like the organization and their leaders need to take the first steps, and only then will the individual make the move to be accountable for their engagement. Leah, this would love to get your comments on that. And question was, is there an order here?
Yeah, I mean, again, within the X model, right, there are three conversations really. The contribution side is performance and is performance related. Let's just leave it at that. The other side is where your career conversations come in terms of satisfaction, and then the middle is the engagement conversation. So there are three in there, Lynn. Order, I would be happy if leaders spent even 10 minutes a week or a portion of their one-on-ones touching on any one of those three components. So it's hard for me to pick one as more important, but I think one-on-ones, those weekly meetings, they maybe focus on contribution. They rarely focus on the satisfaction side of things and probably not the engagement. So
Yeah,
I would
maybe
say,
one way to talk about, because I agree with you. I mean, I'm not sure that is necessarily a sequence or formula.
Right.
But would you all agree that it suffices to say that intentionality is really, if you have the intentionality and the thoughtfulness around deploying the whole model, you're going to be okay. Is that fair to say, ladies?
Fair, absolutely fair. Conversation, rapport, trust, dialogue, all of that is really the entry point for the engagement conversation, the contribution, and the career conversations we want folks to have.
Okay. Well, I think we have to leave it at that. We're at 12:46, and I'll bring Avery back and we'll hand back over to you.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to quote someone from the chat, Kathy. Excellent presentation. It has been such a pleasure to sit back here and listen to the three of you share your stories, insights, and everything. And to see the audience so engaged in the chat, it's really been a wonderful session. So thank you again for your time today, everybody. We will be taking about a 15-minute break. And up next, we have Tim joining us from Intrepid for their session, The Innovative Leaders Playbook, Embedding Practice, Feedback, and AI into Development. So in just a moment, I will end this session, and you all can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. All right, thank you again, everyone. We'll see you soon.